Hey everyone, welcome back. And in this episode, we're finally gonna take a look at Vuex, how to implement it, and basically how you will see how it's gonna help us, right? So as always, I have my API running in the background, and I have my application running here. I went ahead and created some random user. So let's first go ahead and install Vuex. So we want to npm install Vuex and wait for it to install. All right, now that that's finished, I'm gonna go ahead and spin up my server again. Okay, so there it is. My application is running again. Let's crash this outline. I don't know what that is. There we can see our Vuex in our dependencies, right? So we're going to be using that. So general pattern for using Vuex is what we want to do is we want to create a folder and we want to call it stores. And in this folder, we want to create a Vuex store that's going to basically centralize the information. And as always, you want to keep things modular. So for example, stuff regarding profiles goes into one store, and for example, if I have a login page and I have something relating towards authentication and storing the state for user authentication, I would create a separate module for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with profiles.js. Okay, and what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and import vue from Vue. We want to import Vuex from Vuex, and the general pattern is we basically go ahead and do vue use Vuex, bada bam, is done. So generally, any particular store has four parts to it: state, getters, mutations, and actions. All right, so state is pretty self-explanatory. This is the state of the module, right? So this module is called profiles, so it's going to be taking care of the profiles information. We have getters, returns some particular data from the store, right? So we only ever want to expose some of the data from the store, and the way we get this data from the store is we use the getters. Mutations. So write data to the store, or in other words, I will say that this is used to mutate state, right? So mutations change your state, or you're writing data to the store, whichever wording helps you to understand this better. And actions are essentially any functionality before mutating. Okay, so actions allow for asynchronous functions to be called and executed. Mutations don't. Mutations are generally like queries or sorry, not queries, but commands. So you're basically saying write this to the store, and that's it. The mutations are generally just write, and actions are do anything. But from actions, you tend to basically get some data and then mutate. But we'll see this. So some prefer to do stuff like const state equals new object, and then when they define their store that they want to export. To create a store, we do vuex store, and we do this, and then they'd like to assign their state. I generally don't use this approach. The only times I do tend to take this approach is when I need a state that needs to be reset it to its default state. So if I define some default state here, I then use a mutation to reset that state, and I use this as an object. But other than that, I tend to not have this floating about here. Okay, so I tend to just go ahead and define my state here like so. Same as I do with my getters, mutations, and actions. Okay, so I am not gonna actually clutter this with my comments. I'm just gonna move them up here. You can delete these, you can keep these, you can do whatever we want with them, but I will leave them up here as a refresher in case you want to keep them. I'm not gonna clutter this up. Okay, so let's start with a state. Let's go ahead into our app view, and here where we have this profiles right here, let's cut this with Control X, and let's paste this into here, right? So now our state consists of a profiles that is an array. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this data. I'm gonna wait on this stuff here, and what I want to do is I want to write a getter. So you can write getters in different ways, but how I tend to make my getters is I want to first write a get, or basically this is how I do it. So I start with a get, and then I basically describe what I get, and I do a underscore separated for my words. All right. So here I want to get profiles, so I do profiles. So get profiles, and I go state and return state profiles. Okay, so then I can go ahead call get profiles, and this will return these profiles here. Now, so here we get profiles. Let's go ahead and make a mutation. So mutations are commands, so we're usually writing to the state or setting the state. So you can start with a set or a write. I usually do set, and here I want to say profiles. Okay, and this is going to be a function where I'll have my state, and I can have a payload. So this is some data which we're gonna pass. If it's more than one object, call it payload. I'm gonna be passing just the profiles here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass profiles here. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say state profiles equals profiles that I'm gonna pass. All right, let me remove this arrow function. Simple enough. Next thing, let's create an action. So actions are your typical methods that is gonna have a side effect, right? So here I want to perform a get using my API, and I want to get some stuff from the API, and then I want to write these mutations. All right. So this action is going to be called load profiles, right? This is going to be, again, a function. And the things that we want to pass into here is the context. And we want to, again, pass a payload if we have one. I am not foreseeing a payload since we're just going to be saying, right, just get everything, okay? So what does the context refer to? The context refers to the store. So you're gonna get all the basically all the functions that come with the store, like getting the getters, committing to mutations, and dispatching actions. All right. So I'm actually gonna say API here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass the API object to my store from the Vue app. I would not consider this a very good practice, but again, since I declared it as a global variable in my Vue app, I am just gonna go ahead and use this. All right. So let's go ahead into our app view here. Let's copy this here, this method, so load profiles. And I'm gonna just say call this API. Okay. And rest data is gonna be the profiles. All right. So what I want to do now, instead of assigning it to the profiles, I will delete this, and I want to say context dot commit, right? So what commit does is it's gonna call a mutation, and the mutation that I want to call is called set profiles, all right? And in here, the payload that I'm passing is rest data, okay? Let me close this menu here so we can see it better. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So one thing you can notice is this context basically has a function called commit. So we're not using anything else except the commit function. So what we can do is we can actually destructure this context to just have the commit function, and we can use just that. All right, so let's go ahead and try call this API, and we're gonna do it from here. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this method here, and here. Actually, before we do this, we'll have to go into main.js. We have to import our store from SRs, from the stores and profiles. Okay. And we have to put our store into our Vue app here. Okay. That looks all right. So let's go ahead and say this store dot dispatch. Okay. So what is dispatch? Let me close this again. Dispatch is you're going to be dispatching an action. All right. So same as we are doing a commit. So commits are for mutations, and actions use dispatch to be accessed. All right. So we want to follow the same pattern where we dispatch load profiles, and what we want to do is pass this API to it. Okay, and we want to use this API. Let's comment this out. And what else I want to comment out is this rendering of the list, because I no longer have the profiles here, and that's basically going to mess up this code. So let me open up the console here and make sure that nothing is breaking. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead to the network and let's see if it is getting our profiles. So here you can see, if I refresh again, here is the call, and here's what we're returning. Okay, so this leads me to believe, right, this is actually getting called, and now we want to go ahead and get these profiles. All right, so for now, let's go ahead and create a computer property, and I'm going to call this profiles. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to return this store getters, and what I want to do is I want to access get profiles. All right, just like so. Let's go ahead and peek into the console, make sure we're not getting any errors. Let's refresh. Okay, nice. Let me uncomment this. Hit this, and there we go. Here is the beauty of Vuex, and hopefully you're seeing it, that this store is global, all right? Same as the event bus. So now we no longer need to rely on the event bus. We can go ahead and use this store to get this centralized data, all right? So now let's take a look at this event. So what this event was doing is it was listening for this form to be submitted, and once it basically created the profile, it uh, added this profile to this profiles list data that we had here. All right, so we no longer need this event anymore. Okay, let's go ahead and open our homepage here. Okay, and here where I have my comment to do store result in Vuex, this is really already pre-built for us. So all we need to do is create a action that is basically going to accept a profile and write it to our mutation. Now, the big question is, should you be using a mutation here or should you be using an action? And we're not going to be doing anything asynchronous, so we're just basically committing a created profile to the Vuex store. All right. So what we want to do is add profile state profile. So this is our new mutation. Let's go ahead, take state profiles, push profile. Okay. And let's go ahead into our home here. And instead of calling this event bus, let's call this store. And same as we call commit here, we can say commit here. We can say load profiles. Sorry, not load profiles, add profile. And let's pass rest data here. Okay, let's delete this since we're no longer dispatching that event anywhere. Let's save it. Let's give this a refresh and let's add a new profile. So I'll just call it new, newest, and change the gender. This menu looks a little bit, Chrome must have gotten an update. Hello world in my bio, all right. So let's create a profile and there we go. So you can see that Vuex has that reactivity. You instantly push something to the state of Vuex and instantly it is displayed here. All right. So this is really the big power of Vuex. It's reactive and it's centralized and it's modular. All right. So you when you're creating modules, components in your application, you generally want to figure out right the local state for your components. You want to get all the global states shared between those components for a task that they're accomplishing. You want to push that into a module, and then you want to basically make those components use the local state to basically accomplish the tasks that they then need to move the global state around and communicate maybe that with the API. Okay, so let's move this forward a little bit. We can still fix this up a little bit when we navigate to a what's it called to the profile page. We want to basically do something here to return one of the profiles from our state. All right. So let me go ahead. I will close this. Actually, I'll delete this comment since this is something we'll have already done. Let's close this. Let's go into our profile here. And this is where we're getting the profile from the API, right? But we actually have the global state, and when we reload our page, we're loading in this global state from the API, right? So we no longer need to go to the API unless somebody else pushes a profile up to there, but they have it on their own list. But we'll not get into basically into synchronization and all of that. But let's just focus on this client and the locality here. So how can we accomplish this task? So we already know that we have a bunch of profiles here, and we know that it's reactive. So what we can actually do is, instead of having this profile here, we can again create a computed property, and we can call it profile. And let's for now do this store dot getters get profiles, right? So at this point, it's going to be a list of profiles. What we want to do is we want to then filter it. X is going to be a singular profile, and it's going to be first name that we want to compare it with this name here. So let's cut this, let's paste it here, and let's put it here, right? So this is still going to return an array. So we want to grab the first object in this array, and we want to return this. And this, at this point, this should be a single profile. Okay, we no longer have to worry about any of this, since this is going to be reactive. So let's comment this out, save this. So first issue that we're going to run into here is that when the application loads, there aren't going to be any profiles. All right, so essentially what we want to do is we want to say these profiles, we want to say profiles, let profiles, if profiles dot length less than or equals 0, we want to return, right? And let's return null here, right? And here we can say, I think it will be better if we wrap this in a div instead of, and we will say vif profile. Okay, so at this point, then if the profiles do exist, we can do something like this. And let's do console log profiles. Okay, silly me, I have not grabbed the parameters from the route. So this dot route, let name equals this. And let's actually scratch this line. I don't think this should be a problem at this point. Okay, remove the console log. And here you can see no profile here, but yeah, we have the guard. If we go to a profile, if we refresh it, the profile is instantly load, and look at the amount of code we can just go ahead and remove. All right, so this will be it for this episode. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments section. If you enjoyed these episodes, leave a like, subscribe, share. It will help out my channel a lot. And as always, see you in the next episode.